What is up, my Squirtleites? It is I, your king, welcoming you back to Destiny 2. I know I have Destiny 1 gameplay up, but honestly, I just couldn't be bothered to log on to Destiny 2 again, so that's why you're getting that. With that in mind, we are going to talk about Destiny 2, the recent blog post that Bungie uploaded, as well as a lot of the community complaints and concerns with the game, and why I think we're still not in any better of a situation than we were months ago. So for those who aren't aware and haven't been paying attention to games and media lately, Destiny 2 is in kind of a rough spot, for a plethora of reasons, if I'm being honest. Just all sorts of issues, including microtransaction problems, as well as core gameplay components in and of itself. When Destiny 2 first came out, it was honestly kind of viewed with rose-tinted glasses. A lot of people really enjoyed the game, and they didn't really start to uncover its issues until they got into the meat of the endgame, which is where most of the complaints are. However, over time, those complaints have evolved and eventually have just kind of accrued into one giant mountain of salt. I'm looking at you, Reddit. So, with that in mind, Bungie decided to finally, almost 3 months after the game's launch, address all of these complaints and concerns. Now, technically, they addressed them, sort of, over a month ago, where they provided a list of complaints and feedback that they've received that they have been looking into and were planning on making fixes for. Finally, in this blog post, they decided to actually address how and when those fixes will take place. Now, I'm not going to go into depth what those fixes were. Honestly, for the most part, they were fine. Most of them were short-term. The only one that really baffled me was the fact that they made exotics easier to obtain when, honestly, exotics are already way too easy to obtain in Destiny 2. But I digress. That's not what I'm here to talk about. What I am here to talk about is the first and last paragraph of it, where they basically talked about how they are going to be more communicative with the community in future. Which would be great, honestly. Finally! Because honestly, Bungie has always been notorious for dressing up their statements and kind of just speaking in their own little world, their own little fantasy, when everyone else is kind of screaming at them and asking for real information. They're really bad at being transparent, to say the least. So it's good that they're finally promising to do that. However, that, of course, still remains to be seen, and I really hope that they commit to that. However, my biggest problem with the statement that they made is the fact that a lot of their issues only work in a specific bubble, and that bubble is completely ignoring the fact that Destiny 1 ever existed. Now, before anyone criticizes me for saying this, yes, I get it. They could not have made big changes right from the get-go. That would actually be impossible. In fact, I wouldn't expect any big changes within the next year for Destiny 2. What does bother me is the fact that they haven't even acknowledged the big complaints. And when I mean big complaints, I don't mean complaints regarding Destiny 2's content or endgame. I mean complaints regarding Destiny 2's core, its foundation. The kind of stuff that has basically everybody scratching their heads as to why it was changed from the first game. The fact that that stuff wasn't even acknowledged, heck, even doubled down on by Bungie, even reinforced to the point where they said, yes, this is how we're going to keep it. I'm talking about stuff like the kinetic energy and power weapon economy, and the fact that really nobody likes that all that much. They want their special and heavy weapons back, because that completely ruins the power fantasy. The fact that there isn't really any loot to go after, there aren't any interesting or possibly even broken weapons, the fact that ability cooldowns are so long, the fact that abilities are completely diluted into 2 trees that aren't really all that fun to choose from. Things like that. Stuff that was changed from Destiny 1 that never should have been changed in the first place. I want acknowledgement regarding those things. Are you going to change it in the future? Are you going to start making your way back towards the way that Destiny 1 behaved? Or are you going to double down on this for the sake of balance and keep things the way they are? Please let me know so I can be more informed on whether or not I even want to bother with this game anymore. You can't ignore the fact that Destiny 1 existed. That's actually impossible because you built an entire community off of that game. Yes, Destiny 1 also had a rough start. It is not a rough start that is in any way like what Destiny 2 has had, though, because Destiny 2 lacks all of the excuses that Destiny 1 had. And Destiny 1 didn't have a lot of excuses, but it had some. It still was kind of the first of its kind. Destiny 2 is Bungie's not even second rodeo, more like their 6th or 7th, because you have to include all of the updates and expansions that Destiny 1 went through, where huge, sweeping, overarching changes were made. You can't really compare Destiny 2 vanilla and Destiny 1 vanilla, and even if you do, I would still argue with complete solidarity that Destiny 1 had it way better. Not that it was a better game, but because it was in a better situation than Destiny 2's in. Destiny 1 had an excellent foundation even at the very beginning. Its issue was the fact that it lacked story and content. Destiny 2 doesn't lack those things, but because its foundation is so terrible, it makes all of that story and content honestly look bad, look a lot worse than it should. And Destiny 1's scenario was a lot more easily fixed. You can add content. Destiny 1 is the equivalent of going to the store, buying a cake, but instead just being given the ingredients. Okay, sure, they didn't give you the full cake like you paid for it, but at least you can work with that. Destiny 2 is going to the store and trying to buy the same cake again 3 years later, and then this time they just give you an artichoke for some reason. That you can't work with at all, because no matter how you spin it, you still can't make that artichoke anywhere near as sweet as the cake might be. That is the major issue. Destiny 2 is not just content vapid. In fact, Destiny 2 really doesn't have that bad of content. Like I said, it's only bad because the foundation of the game is so bad. Most of the content in Destiny 2 is actually pretty good. The adventures, the lost sectors, hunting for all sorts of loot, a lot of the strikes are actually pretty decent. I know a lot of people disagree with me on that, but I think compared to a lot of vanilla Destiny 1 strikes, yeah, they're better. It might be frustrating, but they're better. They're more well designed. The story has issues, but it's still a lot better than Destiny 1's story was to begin with. It still actually can make a name for itself. It actually has a story to tell. Like, this content is definitely superior to what Destiny 1 began with, but it makes this game look so much more hopeless than Destiny 1 ever did. It makes it so much harder to go back to. It honestly makes it harder to play. And that's sad, because you guys had 3+ years to figure this out. 3+ years of community feedback on what they enjoyed about the game, and then you guys just tossed it all out, and now you're trying to start from scratch again. And you can't ignore that fact. You can never ignore that fact. And while, again, I don't think that they can address those community complaints and concerns, they can't provide fixes anytime soon. At the very least, I just want confirmation of which direction we're going in. Are we going to start working our way back to the way Destiny 1 was in terms of the foundation aspect, in terms of the abilities, in terms of the gunplay, in terms of the loot, in terms of the fun factor? Are we going to start to work our way back to Destiny 1 or not? Because if we're not, then honestly, I won't have to bother. And if you ask me, well, why are you even bothering now? Because as I've said many times, Destiny 1 is very special to me. Very important to me. It is one of my all-time favorite games, no question. It means a lot to me, and the 3 years that I had with it are 3 years I would never, ever trade for anything. So as long as there's still hope for the game, I'm gonna cling to it. Just, Bungie, let me know if there is or not. Please. And thank you.